Wow, The Irishman is quite an experience. It's a hell of a lot to unpack. And of course it would be with a film that's 3.5 hours long. I'm still trying to decide what my overall feelings are regarding it. So let's talk about it. So The Irishman is directed by Martin Scorsese and is starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino and Joe Pesci. So it's an epic crime drama that is based on the 2004 book I Heard You Paint Houses by Charles Brand. It mostly focuses on Robert De Niro's character Frank Sheeran, who is a hitman and becomes involved with Joe Pesci's character Russell Bufalino, a mobster, and Al Pacino's character Jimmy Hoffa, who is a union leader. So as I said, Robert De Niro plays Frank Sheeran, who is also a World War II veteran, and his story is told through his narration as an elderly man. Some of the plot revolves around him working his way through the ranks whilst having to also deal with and struggle with mobsters and politics, and finds himself having to make a lot of difficult choices and sacrifices in order to get where he wants to be, and what that ultimately ends up meaning for him in the long run. Now, I'm always excited when I hear that Scorsese has a new film out, and not only is he the master of his craft, but he is simply one of the best directors of all time. And I'm personally a huge fan of Goodfellas, Casino, Shutter Island, Wolf of Wall Street. I really like some of his earlier films as well, such as Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, but those I just mentioned are some of my favourites. So The Irishman truly goes back to Scorsese's roots. It's such a welcome return to have him direct a mobster flick after so many years, and to bring back that familiar tone, style and atmosphere that we're used to. And to have on board such a huge cast of A-list actors all together in one film is just an absolute treat. While some of the story and the themes felt familiar, it's the execution of the story that makes The Irishman stand out from, say, Goodfellas, Casino or Wolf of Wall Street. As they all have these, as all these films have that sort of, rise and fall theme, which is a staple of some of Scorsese's movies. This movie, however, delves deeper into that theme and explores a much more sort of vivid and visceral and devastating impact of the fall and consequence it has in the grand scheme of things. So in that regard, out of all his sort of mobster-based movies, The Irishman is probably his most thought-provoking and poignant in his themes. Now, as a Scorsese movie, as usual, it's massively directed, great cinematography and top acting. The biggest problem I had with the film was the second act and how heavily the story weighed on his politics. Obviously, Jimmy Hoffa is one of the main characters in the movie, so I had to go into it expecting this. But holy shit, for me, it was pretty oversaturated with political talk, a little bit too much for me. I really didn't expect the amount of detail we would have to absorb regarding Jimmy Hoffa. For me, it was just too much. In fact, it got to a point where I was thinking, where is this story going? I think you're definitely going to benefit and have a better experience of this if you do already have a little bit of knowledge on Jimmy Hoffa prior to seeing this. But for me, when Al Pacino playing Jimmy Hoffa is introduced, is where I start to lose a little bit of interest, as the gangster stuff kind of takes a back seat and starts to feel more like a sort of political thriller than a crime drama. And I was just like, come on, just get back to the gangster stuff. That's what I'm mostly here for. There's also a lot of quick editing, and you move sort of swiftly from one scene to the next. Now, I will say this did help with the pacing of the film. I will admit that for its runtime, the pacing was really good. But also for me, the de-aging was pretty distracting throughout the film. Although really well done, I did find it a little bit immersion breaking, especially the way De Niro's eyes looked. It looked like he was wearing contact lenses the whole time. I did find myself craving a bit of that sort of Scorsese brutality in the more violent scenes. I thought it was actually fairly tame for a Scorsese gangster flick. Also, there are so many names of side characters that get thrown at you in certain scenes. It can really get confusing. You're like, who? What? Hey, who? In all honesty, during the second act, I was feeling more sort of negative thoughts than positive, as I also found the story start to feel a little bit incohesive and a bit all over the place. But luckily, by the beginning of the third act, it all starts to make sense and comes together in a satisfying way. And I had huge respect with the way they handled the story by the end. So as I said, the biggest negative for me was that it revolved too much around politics. But the other thing I wanted to mention, it will be hard for me to recommend this to most people, not only for that reason, but because I think if they had focused a bit more on, say, the family side of things and the impact that all the events that occur has on them, more than focusing on politics. I think it would have been a bit more relatable and heartfelt, and would have added a lot more emotional weight to it, I think. Some of my favourite scenes in the movie would have been where there were characters sitting down with each other talking serious business, and bit by bit the scene would become more and more tense, and with a little bit of sort of humour thrown in there as well. Now, I did want a bit more of that throughout. For me, there wasn't enough of that, and those were the moments in the script I did enjoy the most. Now, one thing I do love is tracking shots, and oh my, how Scorsese certainly delivers on that front. In fact, straight from the get-go, it's obvious it's a Scorsese movie, as the camera does this long tracking shot down a hallway to the sound of In the Still of the Night by the Satins, and immediately you feel immersed. Luckily, there are a lot of tracking shots scattered throughout the movie as well. The way the film is directed and the strength of the script and the acting is what helps to keep you engrossed. I also love the way they approach the story structure of The Irishman and how it was presented and handled in such an interesting way, sort of cutting back and forth between past and present, and the way the story is integrated had a lot more significance than I would ever have imagined. When you see it, you'll know what I mean. And it's just so clever and creative the way the movie slowly unravels what shit is gonna go down in the final act. It is genius. So as I said at the start, I'm still trying to process my overall feeling for the movie, so I'm going to watch it a few more times with the hope of coming to a final verdict. And it really does live up to its label as being a sort of epic gangster drama, and definitely has the makings of becoming a classic. It is without doubt one of, if not the most complex gangster movies ever made in relation to its sort of themes, plot and storytelling. So I would say The Irishman, from a technical and critical standpoint, deserves at least an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. But for me, my experience of it, at least the first time around, would be maybe a 7 out of 10. Now, I know that seems low, but I got a feeling that score will go up the more I see it. As a movie like this definitely warrants multiple views, I think, to fully appreciate it. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing it again, as I recognise that it is a great movie, but I personally didn't have a great first experience with it, I would say. But as I said, on more views, I'm hoping to change that. But let me know your thoughts on The Irishman. I understand it does have wide acclaim critically and commercially. So it will be interesting to know your thoughts on it as well, and whether you agree with any of my points, negative or positive. But in the meantime, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to hear about upcoming content. You've been watching Feature Creature, and I'll catch you next time.